Good afternoon. When we really want to know what somebody's thinking, what they're really feeling, what do we look to? Their actions or their words? What they say or what they do? One of the great truisms of all time. Actions do speak louder than words. So let's take the defense attorney up on her request and look at Michael Dunn's actions right after he shot and murdered Jordan Davis. Everything he did from that point forward is consistent with what? Fled the scene. Never told his dear, sweet, beloved Rhonda Rower ever about a weapon. Went back to his hotel room. Checked out. Fled the city. All of them consistent with guilt. Well, how about the three boys? How about their actions? What are they consistent with? After being fired upon, they came back to the scene, called 911, waited for the police, spoke to the police, answered all of their questions, all of their actions consistent with innocence. That's what this case is about. To be sure, that defendant didn't shoot Jordan Davis to save his life. He murdered him to preserve his pride. Period. And I agree with the defense attorney. It's not a complicated case. It's a common sense case. Something you all rely on every day of your lives. Common sense. And let me assure you, what I'm about to say, the case that we've presented from day one, it's not about distraction. And we don't want or need your sympathy. After 2 years, almost 2 years, it's a little late for that. The only thing we're asking for is what you were sworn to do. Speak the truth. And from that, you will deliver justice in this case. So why? Why is Jordan Davis not in this courtroom? From the moment Michael Dunn pulled into that parking space and heard that music and felt his rear view mirror rattle, what was his perception? Remember that word? We heard so much about it from the defense attorney in jury selection. So much about it in her opening statement, perception. What was Jordan Davis at that moment? He wasn't Leland Brunson's best friend. He wasn't a 17-year-old out looking for girls, worried about his breath. And he wasn't a high school junior on Thanksgiving break. I hate that thug music. Michael Dunn decided from the very first moment that Jordan Davis and Leland Brunson and Tevin Thompson and Tommy Storns were thugs. Period. And everything he did, everything he thought, everything he heard afterward was colored through that lens. They were just 4 thugs in the car. So he said, 18 hours later. And so he wrote to his family the letter that was, in his words, as accurate as it could be. But I'm going to ask you to use your common sense in this case. It's not complicated. And let me just run through with you quickly some common sense reasons why you know this wasn't self-defense. It was self-denial. You're not going to talk to me that way. Stephen Smith, very first witness, I submit to you, maybe had the most important testimony in the case. He doesn't know anybody in this case. He was just walking out of the store and he was stopped by a grown man yelling. Not yelling, "You're not going to talk to me that way," or "You're not going to kill me, you son of a bitch." Saying that, "You're not going to talk to me that way." Think about the content of that statement. If that defendant had thought for an instant that Jordan Davis had any kind of weapon at all, is that what he'd say? "You're not going to talk to me that way"? Of course not. Or is that consistent with a 45-year-old man being disrespected by a 17-year-old stranger, thug? There's one of the thugs that's no longer with us. Wow. The testimony today from Rhonda Rower, we brought her back because he told you, as soon as she got in the car, I told him they had a gun. At the hotel, I told her they had a gun. On the 2.5-hour ride back, I told her they had a gun. Miss Rower, did he ever tell you anything about any weapon? No. That's the evidence. No. The person closest to him in his life, he didn't say a word about a gun because there was no gun. There was no weapon. There was no stick. There was no tripod. That didn't come to be until he was sitting across from homicide detectives and realized he'd been caught. Wow. Tommy Storns, the guy on probation. Think about that for a second. He's on probation for a felony. He's got a firearm in the car. Do you think Tommy Storns would have stopped in that parking lot if there was a gun in the car? I mean, it was 7:38 in the evening. People like Alyssa and Christopher LeBlanc were coming out of the loop. People all over the place. Light, traffic. The police are coming. The police are coming. 10 shots at a gas station, the police are coming. Do you think Tommy Storns would have stopped the car in that parking lot if there was a gun in the car? Of course not. Of course not. That makes no sense. That's where he stopped the car and went back. Jordan Davis, according to the defendant, has banged the shotgun against the window, has threatened his life, said this shit is going down now, has opened the door, and is getting out. Why didn't he shoot him? Why didn't Jordan Davis shoot him if he had a gun, an intent to kill, or an intent to harm, an intent to injure? Why would he sit there and wait for him to get into the glove box? Wait for him to take the holster off. Wait for him to chamber around. Wait for him to turn back around. Why would he do that? That makes no sense. The defendant's account defies all common sense. Why would he leave? I asked him about that today. The parking lot's lit. You're out of your car. Your girlfriend's at the door. The truck's gone. They're gone. He didn't know they stopped. Why would he leave if he hadn't done something wrong? Why? That's what he left. Lights, people, help. Why not call? It's 3 digits. He's 45. He hasn't done anything wrong. He was defending his own life. Why not call? Ever. He never called. Detective Musser called him. He told you, well, I called, Ken Lescalate called me. Told him I needed to speak to him. Had something important to say. We brought in Mr. Lescalate. Did he ever say anything about having something to talk to? No. Anything like that? No. That was a flat-out lie. Why is he not calling the police? They're coming. And why would he say that? If Jordan Davis had a gun and was threatening his life, he wouldn't say, you're not going to talk to me that way. That wouldn't be what he would say. But is that not what Stephen Smith heard? Was Stephen Smith impeached at all about that? Was his credibility called into question about that? Not at all. Not at all. Uncontroverted. Jordan Davis, and y'all have thought about this already, the injuries to him, he wasn't outside the car. That's easy now. He was leaning as far as he could, as fast as he could, over to his left when he was shot and murdered. If he'd have been outside the car, the injuries wouldn't be in the backs of his legs. If he had been standing up, the trajectory wouldn't be like this. There can be no question, he was inside the car when he was murdered. And there's no evidence that there was anything in either of his hands at the time. Nothing. Mr. Knox made a big deal saying the door must have been open. And I kept saying to Mr. Knox, what about the injuries to Jordan Davis? He didn't address it. He ignored it. It doesn't matter. I mean, the guy's working on trajectories. He's not going to include the ending point. When I asked him, how could Jordan Davis, look at those green rods. How could Jordan Davis be leaned so far over to create the angle in his body that the bullet went? He'd have to be leaning through the back seat, which he can't do. That's what you get for $350 an hour. Or is that not consistent with Jordan Davis leaning forward, using the seat in front of him as a shield from the man pointing a gun in his direction? Just like Dr. Simons showed you with this mannequin and on her cell. All of the shots consistent with his body being like this, inside the car. They want to contrast Dr. Simons and Michael Knox. At least she considered all the evidence. She didn't ignore it. Easier common sense stuff. The pieces of the car, if the door's open, all that plastic and the glass that's on the seat that you just saw from the state, what's in the parking lot? If the door's open, why is there no glass in that parking lot? Why is there no plastic in that parking lot? Why is that if the door was open? You don't have to be an accident reconstructionist or a medical examiner to figure that out. The enraged 17-year-old with the shotgun is now getting out of the car to kill somebody. Cars that are so close together the doors can't open fully. And magically, there's no damage to the defendant's car. There's no red paint. There's no black paint on the SUV. Look at the pictures all you want. It's not there because it didn't happen. And his little excuse about the wheel well, that doesn't work either. The door extends all the way out. If Jordan Davis had opened the door in a violent rage, as he would have you believe, there would be all kinds of damage to that car. If that door was open when he was shot and murdered, and Tommy Storms backed the car up, where would that door be? All the way down the side of his car. It's not. Ken Lescalet, unimpeached, completely contradicted what the defendant told you. And we've talked about this several times since we first met last Monday, and I know that seems like a long time ago. But it's not like TV. You don't have well-spoken actors and actresses. It doesn't play out on a script. I submit to you it's better and it's worse. The fact that the one person who solved the murder of Jordan Davis is now a 25-time convicted felon. Not even Hollywood could write that. Sean Atkins. But the blood that you saw on the concrete, that's real blood. Not like Hollywood either. There's no evidence Jordan Davis had a hat on. Well, there's some. It was with all of his stuff. Everything else he was wearing at the time. And if it's not like TV, and you wanted Tommy Storms not to be on probation, and you wanted Chris LeBlanc not to have a capias for driving on license suspended, consider a couple of things. Who picked the witnesses for this case? Who picked the time, the place, the consequences, the results? It wasn't us. We're not the directors of this play. Everything you saw, everything you heard was set in motion by one man. One grown man. And in real life, in TV it's over in 30 minutes, 60 minutes maybe for these shows. In real life, it's not like that. You get all kinds of evidence. Y'all probably thought I was crazy when Sukan Worf walked in here and I had to tell you there's no DNA on the shell casing. What? Why did they bring us that? The guy said he did it. Because contrary to what the defense attorney said, I submit to you that the sheriff's office did a thorough investigation. Down to the last shell casing that was swabbed. To all of those photographs. To all of the physical evidence that does matter. That's not a distraction. That is evidence for you to consider. Whether it's a big deal or a little deal, whether it's good or whether it's bad. I submit to you that a person in this country is not only entitled to a trial, they're entitled to a fair trial. All of the evidence, however insignificant to anyone. The defense said that you can't believe the boys because they're inconsistent. Well, let me suggest something to you. If they had come in here and they all told you exactly the same thing, word for word, action by action, that should give you concern. That should be reason for concern. But it's not like that. Two of them were 17, one of them was 19. They had just seen one of their friends gunned down, died in one of their arms. Again, that's real life. That's what you get. Do they remember things differently? Sure. Did they see things differently? Sure. Did they conspire to lie? Absolutely not. The defense attorney said, the defendant's a peaceful person. Everyone said he was peaceful. Well, my recollection was that 3 people did, and all 3 of them weren't friends of the defendant. They were friends of his parents. Did they really know him? Did any of them have contact with him anywhere close to November 23rd, 2012? Any of them? Did you hear that from any of their mouths? No. He had a good time at the wedding. Well, the murder didn't occur at the wedding. It didn't happen there. No thugs at the wedding. The show casings are a distraction. They don't tell you anything. They don't. What was he thinking, the defendant? What was he intending when the first one ejected out of his 9mm pistol? What was he intending when the second one came out? Or the 9th? Or the 10th? He told you himself. They were all intended to do one thing. This doesn't mean anything. You know, there's an old saying in the law that if the facts are against you, argue the law. If the law's against you, argue the facts. If they're both against you, put somebody else on trial. Isn't that what the defense has done? Isn't that what the defendant himself has done? It's Rhonda's fault I ordered pizza. It's Rhonda's fault I had a rum and coke. It's Charlie's fault I had to go outside. It's the detective's fault the way they interviewed me. It's Kipple's fault because he missed a projectile. It's the boy's fault. Let's pause at that one for a minute. It's the boy's fault. Again, contrast what they did afterwards and what the defendant did afterwards. Are they to blame for the murder of Jordan Davis? The defendant said, he was threatened over and over again. When? Not that night. Not the next morning. At a police station when he was being questioned. Not right away, as the defense attorney said. What did you think he was going to say? Did you expect him to say something different to Rhonda Rower? Yeah, honey, I just shot and killed this boy for no reason. Yeah, detective, that's what I did. Do you expect him to say that? Do you? The defense attorney said he had just seconds. It wasn't just seconds between the time the music was playing and he pulled in and the time he fired. You can watch the video, watch Rhonda Rower walk in, hear the gunshots. It wasn't seconds. All of those things he could have done differently. And you know, the defense attorney wants to contrast everything. Well, let's contrast Michael Dunn and Stephen Smith. Stephen Smith, ironically, was about to pull into that very same parking space when he heard the music. And he said, you know what? I'll park somewhere else. The defendant chose to pull into that parking space. And when Stephen Smith left Jordan Davis, he was talking with his friends in the backseat of a car. When the defendant left Jordan Davis, he was taking his last breaths in Leland Brunson's arms. How about that contrast of actions, of decisions, of choices? Jordan Davis was trying to shoot him, the defense attorney said. With what? There was no gun. There was nothing that looked like a gun ever in that car. You heard that from almost every witness but one. Nobody said the defendant was angry. They said Jordan Davis was angry. Tevin Thompson said it. Leland Brunson said it. They don't count. The two people who were there, just a few feet from him, looking into his car, they don't count. Apply the rules of evidence, or the rules that the court's going to instruct you on, to the witnesses. Apply them to the defendant. Well, she left a couple out. Did the witness have some interest in how the outcome of the case should be decided? You think Michael Dunn has an interest in the outcome of the case? You think? Does the witness's testimony agree with other testimony and evidence in the case? Did the witness at some time make a statement inconsistent with the testimony he or she gave in court? Don't forget to apply those credibility factors to the defendant, because Judge Healy is going to tell you the defendant is to be treated like any other witness. You can believe everything, part of, or nothing that he says. The defendant didn't hide his car when he got home. He didn't throw out the shell casings. Well, guess what? He didn't know they were following him. He didn't know Sean Atkins had written down the tag number. Nothing on the news about a suspect. He told you that himself. He just checked out and went home. The defendant was torn by what happened. Torn was the word. Well, he found out Jordan Davis was dead about 1 o'clock in the morning. After that, he went to sleep. Took a shower. Packed his bags. And left town. He was really torn up. The defense attorney asked rhetorically, why did Tommy Storns drive to the plaza? Well, how about the fact that his car was under fire? That the glass was shattering? That bullets were coming through the doors? That bullets were going into the doors? That a bullet passed over his head into the little visor? And I'll ask you to rely on your recollection about the search of the plaza. The testimony was that the boys did tell Detective Musser they had been to the plaza that night. And he told you that he sat down with each one of them, all three, face to face, eye to eye. Talked to them for as long as he wanted. There wasn't a need to search the plaza that night. So for all the defense is complaining about why the plaza wasn't searched, they didn't have a reason to. Nobody ever said anything about a weapon until the defendant said it. The boys hid a gun, I guess in the trash can or in the bushes. They weren't searched. Well, let me suggest to you. His Honor is going to tell you about reasonable doubt. Well, one of the things he's going to tell you, that a reasonable doubt is not a speculative doubt. For you to think or consider that any of those three boys hid a firearm or had a firearm on their person would be nothing more than rank speculation. Jordan Davis hit his head on the door, getting back into the car. Any testimony to that effect? None. Not a word. Mr. Dunn, did you see the police lights across the street when you pulled out at night? Did you see the police lights coming in the opposite direction when you drove north on Southside Boulevard? How convenient. Rhonda Rauer saw him. Chris LeBlanc saw him. Same time. Defense attorney said in jury selection, have you ever been accused of something you didn't do? That question was asked to all of you. Have you ever been accused of something you didn't do? How about Leland Brunson, or Tevin Thompson, or Tommy Storms, or Jordan Davis? Have they not been accused of things that they didn't do in this very trial? Hold the state's feet to the fire to answer the questions that need to be answered. Like whose actions reveal innocence? Whose actions reveal guilt? Who had a gun? Who didn't? Who stayed and called 911? Who left and didn't call anyone? Michael Knox. They're going to suggest to you that Dr. Simons came in here with a particular point of view, but Michael Knox did not. I submit to you that when he was contacted in this case in April of this year, his work is a study and his testimony in contradiction. He admitted that Jordan Davis's body would be inside the car when he was shot. Couldn't say if either of his feet ever hit the ground. No doubt his body's inside the car. This is what he wrote in his report. The first three shots struck the rear door as Jordan Davis was attempting to get back in the car. Where did that come from? There was no evidence he was ever outside the car, and their paid expert said as Jordan Davis was attempting to get back in the car. And she talked about people's demeanor. Did you see his demeanor when I asked him that question? Was he honest and straightforward in answering the attorney's questions? That's another factor. Mr. Knox, can you tell him what shot is first? The one to the chest, the one to the right leg, the one to the left leg? No. He wrote in his report, the first shot was to Jordan Davis' chest. He didn't want to consider the evidence of the bullets through the body. Didn't matter to him, even though that it's all in that line of trajectory. It just didn't matter to him. He didn't even go to the scene. His little diagram of the scene was produced from an aerial photograph. What does that tell you about their expert? That's where they stopped the car. In that parking lot, with all those people, all those businesses, all those lights. And Alyssa and Chris LeBlanc standing there watching it all. He said Jordan Davis had a shotgun, not a water pistol, a shotgun. Do you think for a second that if something like a shotgun came out of that car, they would have missed it? After they told you their attention was on the car, speeding away from the gunshots because they didn't know who was in it? Do you think for a second they would have missed that? Do you think for a second when they got back, the boys got back to the Gate gas station and the whole world's converging, police, rescue, civilians, Samantha Ickes, Andrew Williams, Steve Smith, do you think they would have missed it? If one of those three boys got out of the car with a shotgun? Do you? Mr. Knox in his photograph, he chose the one on the left because that was his perspective. But the one on the right is the same evidence. What does that tell you about his perspective? This is an instruction that Judge Healy will give you. That your verdict should be for the highest offense that's been proven guilty. And let me suggest to you that while your verdict in this case will not change the past, it will forever define it. So what is that? What is that? When a grown man pulls up next to a car full of kids and hates the music they're playing, and his ears start throbbing, and he voices his hatred to his significant other, and he engages them twice, and his last words are, "You're not going to talk to me that way," before he pulls up this at the distance he was at and points it at a 17-year-old who has nothing in his hands and pulls the trigger. And again, and again, and again. 7 times. And then when the car's gone, when it's pulling off, he gets out of his car and takes a shooter's stance and gets down. And when there's no gun sticking out of the car, no shots coming from the car, fires again and again and again. What is that? What is that under our law? About the burden of proof. Ms. Corey addressed that with you in jury selection last week. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt is just that. It's not proof beyond all doubt. It's not proof beyond a shadow of a doubt. It's a reasonable doubt. And Judge Healy will tell you that a reasonable doubt is not a speculative doubt, a possible doubt, an imaginary doubt, or a forced doubt, and use that instruction as guardrails for your discussions. If someone back there among you starts going, well, isn't it possible that this happened? Or could you imagine that that happened? Or can you speculate about that? Bring them back. Bring them back in. Because those are not legally reasonable doubts. And should not cause you to return a verdict of not guilty or any lesser offense. Because the doubt is not reasonable. We're asking you to use your common sense and apply it to this evidence on the law that Judge Healy instructs you on. I've got one more old saying for you. And that is that to the living we owe respect, but to the dead we owe the truth. Jordan Russell Davis, 17, forever now. Somebody's on again, off again boyfriend. Somebody's best friend. Somebody's son. This is the dead. Physical evidence that cannot be refuted or explained away. The words from his own mouth at the time of the killing that he can't now take back. And the memories. Those indelible, wretched memories of all those people that he made witnesses to a murder who haven't forgotten. This is the truth. Thank you for your time.